Hello, everyone. Welcome to an ALEC TV live stream. I'm Catherine Mortensen from ALEC Public Affairs. Joining me in the studio is Leo Briseño. Leo is also with ALEC Public Affairs. And joining us remotely from the Houston suburb of Spring Branch is John Perez. John is a newly elected school board member there at the Independent School District. And of course, this is a suburb of Houston. So John is part of what has become this sort of battleground for our students, the future of education and what's happening in our schools. And we're seeing this all over the country where school boards are flipping hands and parents are just stepping up, getting involved like never before. And John, you are one of those parents. So welcome and thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you for having me, Catherine, and Leo. Thanks for bringing me on board. Thanks for making time. Happy to be here.
So I'll just ask the first question. You have at least one child. I read that you have a 14-year-old daughter in the public schools. Do you have other children? And tell us what their experience has been like over the past 2 years during COVID.
Sure. Actually, I have 4 kids. So one was mentioned in the article that you read. I have 2 sets of twins, 2 graduating seniors at Stratford High School, and 2, rising sophomores. So they'll be sophomores in the upcoming fall. Quite honestly, Catherine, their experience, we've had good experiences in Spring Branch, but at the same time, my wife and I are pretty vigilant. We've stayed on top of their assignments. We've stayed on top of their extracurriculars. We've been involved. We're fans of the nuclear family. We're devout Catholics, strong conservatives. So we didn't completely take our eyes off the road, I guess is what I can say. But at the same time, I know that not every child has that support. And in our district, we have to serve every child, no matter their origin story. And at the end of the day, what I worry about and one of the reasons I jumped into the race is I saw some things happening. I did see some assignments come back to our house where critical race theories began to creep in. And I think a lot of folks sometimes wonder, well, what is critical race theory? It's some legal law class that's taught somewhere in universities. No, it's a political ideology. And what we need to be careful about is letting those political ideologies and the social activism creep into our classrooms. One thing I want to be careful in saying today is now that I'm sworn in as a board member, I definitely want to make sure that everyone understands what I say today is reflective of my personal statements and not anything official from the board. So just make sure that I want to communicate that. But what I did see coming home to the house and what I've heard anecdotes and seen evidence of is, even just last week, public record, we had a book show up in our school, and it's a matter of how does this stuff creep into our classrooms? How does it continue to happen? There was a lot of bad with COVID, but at the same time, it allowed a lens into our classrooms, and parents saw that. And I think they woke up and realized we were pretty trusting. And in some cases that was warranted. We can't be everywhere and everything to our kids. But at the same time, we had to have some faith that our school systems were serving our kids with everyone's best interest in mind. And what we're discovering is that may not have been the case. So we got to be careful.
At what point did you recognize that this was an issue that you had to get involved in personally? You made a decision at some point to run, to get your hands dirty in this issue. What was that point?
So I would say it was about a year ago this time. The school board election prior to ours was contentious as well. A little bit of background there is there was a candidate who had run twice, and she lost for her second time in May of 2021. And as a failed candidate twice, she filed a lawsuit as a disenfranchised Hispanic, and we're still fighting that lawsuit. And one of the reasons I was compelled to run is, as a Hispanic, I was not raised to live in America with the mindset of if at first you don't succeed, lawyer up and get handed a seat at the board. So I'm on public record, saying that I will fight this lawsuit. And now that I'm on the board, that story hasn't changed. That was definitely one thing that compelled me to jump into the race is, seeing that lawsuit and trying to change our district from a at-large district to a single member district, similar to what we have in HISD, was not something I wanted to see. It's taken us down the wrong road towards academic outcomes, taken us down the wrong road towards consensus on governance and policy. And we have a lot of work to do there. So priority number one is keep ourselves at large. Priority number two is let's clean up our classrooms. And so what I started seeing, not just in our household, but from other families in our neighborhood, families that started moving their kids out of some of our public schools, is I would say a over politicization and sexualization of our classrooms. And what I want to be careful in saying is I want every student in our classrooms to feel safe. I want every student, no matter their origin story, to feel like they belong here in SBISD, because they do. What we need to be careful in doing, though, is making sure we leave politics out of our classroom and making sure we leave things like pornography, egregious pornography, out of our classrooms. And I think no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, you might be able to be okay with that. I don't think anybody, walks out and, goes to work and says, geez, I really hope my kid gets exposed to porn at school today. I don't think anybody says that.
John, one of the things that, of course they don't, right? My two children are recent graduates here in Northern Virginia, so I'm totally on board with that. One of the things I'm noticing as I'm listening to you talk about your campaign, what you ran on, what you hope to do, is what I'm not hearing from you is, I'm just not hearing politics from you. I'm hearing a very even tone, focusing on students, focusing on education. So I'm wondering if that is because we looked into your county, Harris County, a suburb of Houston. It overwhelmingly, I think overwhelmingly is a good word, it voted for Biden in the most recent election. So I'm guessing that people who voted for you on the school board were probably not sort of hardcore Trump conservatives. They were more liberal or middle of the road type of voters. So it doesn't sound like you were running on any kind of political agenda or that your appeal was to any sort of political base. You sound very much a centrist sort of board member. Is that accurate?
So I think if you dig deep into our political campaign, you'll see that we tried hard to keep it nonpartisan. I think some of the issues have to bring out the conservative in me. I mean, when you're talking about keeping politically fueled agendas, keeping progressive or liberally fueled agendas, getting things out of the classroom, you're going to be attacked as the conservative in the room. I'm not ashamed to step up and say I'm the conservative in the room. I am trying to be conscious of my role as a school board member now in trying to keep this nonpartisan. But at the same time, I had to show my colors. I had to show my colors as red during the campaign because I had to let people know what I was running for. And the constituents who voted for me, I think overwhelmingly, if you tally up all the conservative, what I would say the votes for us that were conservative, we got a 70-30 referendum, and that's a strong referendum. No matter how you look at it, that's a strong referendum to a conservative platform.
Well, that is a strong referendum, but those numbers sound like a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden voted for you as a school board member then, right? Because your district did go. It's hard for me
to say who voted for who during our election. I mean, if you look at the numbers across Harris County, I think you can probably draw some of the conclusions you're trying to make. But at the same time, our district is a diversified district with voters that, quite honestly, are pretty good at making up their own minds. And I'd also challenge the notion that simply because someone is of a certain color of skin, that they're going to vote Democrat. I think what we're seeing now is a great awakening of the conservative Hispanic. So I would challenge the thought that, just because we live in an area where we're predominantly Hispanic in some cases, that they all voted Democrat or that my backers were Democrat. I would actually sit back and go, perhaps we're really challenging the mindset and the model of what's a conservative. And I think the values at the end of the day is what people vote for and what they strive to create for their families. The opportunities are based on values. And when you look at a Hispanic or any voter at the end of the day, They just want to do right by their family. And I think a lot of what we were trying to do with our campaign message and our platform was just getting things right for our families.
Yeah, no, I'm a Hispanic as well. So I hear you when you say Hispanic values, family, they're very tight knit. Going back to the idea of the whole politicized topic of education, on your website, you state that you're concerned about subjecting students to crossfire and collateral damage of politically fueled agendas. Does it concern you at all that there seems to be an ever expanding list that now kind of includes education, especially K through 12 education now, that could be seen as politically contentious? Does that concern you at all?
So does it concern me that our schools are politically contentious? Is that what you're trying to get at there, Leo?
Right. The idea that, well, now in the scope of things that are politically charged to talk about, K through 12 education is now one of those topics.
Right. So it does concern me that our students have been brought into the political world, right? The political theater, if you want to call it that. Because at the end of the day, what I worry about is our students really being used as pawns in this great battle of politics. Mm. And that's not why they're there. That's not what our educational system was designed to serve. At the end of the day, what we really need to try to do is create critical thinkers. I'm an adjunct lecturer at Rice, and about 10, 15 years ago, I started seeing a shift in how students were showing up to my classroom. And it was very much a, hey, what's the rubric? What's the path to an A? Versus, man, what do I have to do to get an A, right? And if you ask yourself, what's the difference there? It might seem subtle, but really it's a difference of potential and capacity. It's a difference between asking what's enough versus what's the most I can do. And when you start looking at our school system, a critical thinker is going to really sit there and go, okay, what is my job? What is my capacity? What's my potential? What are my opportunities? How am I going to contribute, be productive, be self-reliant, be compassionate in this democracy, in this republic, versus a social activism type rhetoric is going to really teach folks exactly what to think, not necessarily how to think. And I think we need to combat that. And my concern is when we start bringing politics into our classroom, we start driving out some of that critical thinking curriculum.
One thing we have somebody, Benjamin McGeever on Facebook is asking, what would you say is the number one, number two school board issues for Hispanic conservatives in your district?
Number one issues for Hispanic conservatives in our district. So switching gears. So we can talk about the lawsuit facing us. We can talk about issues with politically fueled agendas. But then let's get to the items that are going to take a little bit longer to address and tackle, and it's going to require some hard work. Specific to Hispanic conservatives, it's important for us to recognize our role in America. And a lot of our ancestors came here for a reason. We want to provide opportunities for our families. We want to see that generational transcendence. Certainly, it might take one or two generations to move from that migrant worker or that different station in life to perhaps that entrepreneur, that business owner, that engineer. My dad was son of a migrant worker. My mom was a teacher from West Texas. They happened to meet. Education was very important. They provided opportunities for their family. My dad saw that he had to get out of the small town of Carrizo Springs, became a U.S. diplomat. My mom supported that path. I went to Rice. So there's a lot that can be done and achieved through education. So the number one goal is to really get your kid, get your student, get your daughter, son, no matter the origin story, to take advantage of the opportunities of our public educational system. And that starts with learning English. Every test, every application. I mean, when you start thinking about everything you do in the United States, it starts with the common language, and we have to ensure that our Hispanic students learn English first, and at that point they can take advantage of all kinds of opportunities. And just being an advocate, being a parental advocate for your child, in my mind, is making sure parents understand that is probably one of the top priorities for me in our school district.
Yeah, I would say my maiden name is Martinez, so we're all three of us Hispanics. Yeah, and my family came from northern New Mexico, and I know, just as you just said, John, and I talked a little bit to Leo as well. Education is such a foundational value for the Hispanic families who come to this country. I mean, that's primarily what they're wanting for their children, is that opportunity for an education and a better life. And so that very much resonates with me, that when you talk about Hispanic voters, that's what matters to them. And so I think you're probably right on with this school board issue being so important to Hispanic voters, because it gets to the core of, I think, a lot of Hispanics' identity is, what kind of education is my student getting?
I think that's fair. At the end of the day, we all, I think, appreciate hard work.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that someone wakes up and says, I don't really want to achieve much today. I don't want to make much of myself today. I don't operate with that mindset. I have faith in humanity, along with faith in a lot of other things. Faith in, our country, faith in our state, faith in God. But at the end of the day, having faith in humanity allows us to operate with the mindset of, there's greatness in everyone. There's greatness in every student. There's greatness in every teacher. And you asked about the dynamic on the board. Now that we're on board, we're going to figure out the greatness in our new team. It'll come with time. Trust is built over time. But when you start operating with that mindset, it opens up opportunities. It takes the shackles off. I was meeting with Wesley Hunt and Nikki Haley one time, and she made a great statement, and it stuck with me. It was one of those statements that go, that's really true. The magic happens when the shackles come off. And we all tend to put shackles, either physically, mentally, spiritually, on ourselves, on others, for example, with, mental mindsets, fatigue, overwhelming ourselves with the busyness of life. But at the end of the day, what we're just trying to do is get ourselves to that flow, that state of contentment where, opportunities and the magic happens, like Nikki said.
Yeah. How do you understand your job now as part of the board? Do you see yourself as an employee primarily of the city, or as a representative of the people that put you in this position? And if so, how does that influence the way in which you approach your job now?
Sure. So, volunteer. So definitely not paid to do anything here. But I serve everyone. I serve the students. I serve the teachers. I serve everyone who voted for me, and I serve everyone who didn't vote for me. One of the things I said on my website is I know that I may not be everyone's candidate, but I will serve every constituent, and that applies today. And so one thing I think that has changed is, as soon as you're sworn in overnight, you do have to be, in my mind, from my perspective, a little bit more careful about your words and your actions. It's one thing to be on the campaign trail. It's one thing to speak your mind as you're developing and implementing and espousing your platform. But once you've taken that oath and you're serving alongside folks that, some think like you, maybe not everyone thinks like you, but at the end of the day, we serve everyone, and we have to serve everyone together as a team. And we have to find a way to do that. There are also certain things as a school board trustee that I have to be careful in communicating and acting upon, right? As a resident, as someone who existed before life as a trustee, my actions may have had different consequences. Whereas today, I got to be careful with every interview I do, every public statement I make. And I have to be careful with every decision I make, even as a trustee, right? What does it mean to reconcile the budget? That's impacting lives. It's impacting, dollars that at the end of the day trickle down to people, right? So I think I'm not saying the campaign trail or the election was easy. It was hard, probably one of the hardest things I've done in my life. But I think there were certain things that were a little bit easier before I became a trustee. Just got to be more careful.
Well,
More
I wanted
considerate.
to, yeah, no, I want to ask you a little bit more because I liked that phrase you used. Everyone has an origin story. What is your origin story? It sounds like you have been successful and achieved a lot. How did your life get started, and how did you come to the values that you have today?
Sure. Simply, I won the parent lottery. Like I said, my dad was a hard worker. He showed good promise. He was the son of a migrant worker. My aunts and uncles are scattered from Carrizo Springs all the way up to Illinois. Follow the crops, right? That's what migrant workers did. And my mom, like I said, was a West Texas teacher, but they both, perhaps worked a little harder or did whatever they needed to do and took advantage of the educational opportunities that were afforded them by their parents. And they both met getting advanced degrees. They took advantage of their advanced degrees. They got good jobs. They settled down. They provided opportunities for us in a small town called Carrizo Springs, which is in Southwest Texas. My dad went on to become mayor of Carrizo Springs for a couple terms. I think he saw the storm front coming of the border wars when it came to drugs, and he saw that he needed to get his family out of there. He chose to become a U.S. diplomat, went off to training, came back when I was in fourth grade and announced that we were moving to Amman, Jordan. I still remember that day. I think I ran out of my house and went to a tree and said, okay, my life just changed. I didn't realize how much or how well it had changed. That really changed the trajectory of my life. And quite honestly, the trajectory of my generation in the family. Our branch of the family tree changed based on what my dad and mom chose to do with the educational opportunities provided to them. So I lived in Jordan for a couple of years, Guatemala. I did all of my high school in Costa Rica. So I'd like to say I'm Texas born, world educated, and now I'm Houston rooted. I came back here to go to Rice University, graduated as a chemical engineer, even though I entered as an English major. Started working right out of school with chemical plants, got into consulting, found my way to a niche industry doing process safety and asset integrity. And now I'm on my second startup. I guess maybe not a startup. We're in year 12 now. So we're doing pretty well. I'm excited. It's kind of just my cup of tea is, being an entrepreneur, small company guy. My wife works with me. We're both co-owners here, along with some partners. We have 4 kids, and we just try to do right. But that's my origin story. When you look back and you find the touch points as to what really tweaked, and sometimes it's just a small little tweak that creates an exponential change. Most of them are tied to an educational experience. You look at my parents, you look at my education around the world, you look at who I was exposed to. I often think that what makes a great education is not so much the school name, but your peers. So when I try to tell folks what to pay attention to when they look at education, I try to say, get your kids around the smartest people they can surround themselves with, because that's what does it. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. And when I look around my team, when I look around even my wife, when I was looking around, I was like, man, she's smarter than me. So it just pushes you, right? Surround yourself with great peers, and you'll amaze a lot of people, but you'll even amaze yourself, right? So I like to think I'm humble because I know that I'm still imperfect. We all are, and I think if we can keep that in perspective, then it's easier to serve with grace and mercy.
I like that phrase. What was that phrase? Born in Houston, educated internationally.
So Texas born, world educated, and Houston rooted.
If you make a T-shirt with that, let me know. Because while it's not true of me, I feel like it's something you could put on a T-shirt and market. It's a good phrase.
Got it.
So I think we have the image of a tweet that recently.
Yeah. So let me put this. This is this story. It's just breaking today. And I'll show that screen. Just one moment. The school board organization had originally wanted President Biden to send National Guards into the school board meetings, and they wanted the military personnel. And I think we all are familiar with the story that came out a few months ago that they had requested, some sort of federal help, the FBI, to target parents who were at these school board meetings. But here's the breaking story, Leo, if you want to just read. Yeah.
Sure, the first paragraph there. The National School Boards Association planned to ask the Biden administration to deploy the Army National Guard and military police to school districts beset by parent protests over policies, including mandatory masking and teaching of critical race theory. An internal review is found. The stunning request was included in a draft letter to the president from September of last year, but was ultimately removed from the final version by the NSBA's then CEO, Chip Slavin, according to a report by the Milwaukee-based law firm Michael Best and Friedrich LLP.
Yeah, so that sort of takes us to the next level, that story about federal involvement and the national school boards. What is your reaction to the news that there was at least under consideration the idea of bringing in military troops into these school board meetings?
So my initial reaction is, there must have been some districts that, and I know there were districts that had a bit more turmoil than we've experienced. We've had some interesting and vocal board meetings, but I don't think anything that warranted, the National Guard. But secondary reaction is there's a reason why, as of last night, I think the press release was issued today. We aren't part of the NSBA anymore.
Interesting. Yeah. That would be, yeah.
Yeah. My understanding was, governance policies being cited, but, I saw that late last night, and I believe it was issued this morning or today, but, that's breaking news as well. So,
hear a lot as far as like the whole an article that was very politically charged. But how would you respond to, I guess, accusations from less conservative groups that say, hey, listen, the educational instances where there is a request to bring federal authority into the issue, or where there are protests, or where there are instances of inappropriate content in the classroom are few and far between. It's not actually representative of the majority of what goes on in public schools. And so Republicans and conservatives are the ones making a mountain out of a molehill and using it to politicize elections like the one that we saw in Virginia. How would you respond to a comment like that?
So I think it's a spectrum across the U.S. I can't speak for every parent. I can't speak for every board member. I think this would probably be a prudent time for me to defer on this particular viewpoint to our board president, Chris Ernest. I think he would probably be the one that should be weighing in on that kind of question. I think just as maybe as safe a statement as I can make is, I think we all need to be careful about saying something isn't there until we've walked in other people's shoes. And, everyone has a lived experience, and we need to be conscious of everybody's lived experience. What's often thrown about by folks from both sides of the aisle or, all parts of the spectrum is, you don't understand my lived experience. Okay. Well, it goes for everyone. So I think we just need to be careful about dismissing a lived experience, no matter who it's coming from. So I would just ask that folks try to be patient with school boards as they try to get the right information, do evidence-based decision making, and try to do the best job they can for their communities, which would be our goal as well.
Well, I think that's very wise. I'm just putting up one last quote. This is something that I think it might have been, this was on your website, and I really liked it. You said, I believe safety and stability can be afforded to all students without subjecting them to the crossfire and collateral damage of politically fueled agendas. I don't know a parent in this country who would not agree with that statement. I think we all want our students to go to school to learn and to be safe and to have a stable environment. And I just feel like what we have experienced the last couple of years has been so disruptive to that core mission of our public schools.
No, I agree. And I'm responsible for most of my messaging. I'm just a fan of taking care of the brand directly. And that's what I believe. At the end of the day, like I said before, students, again, no matter their origin story, should feel safe, and they should have stable footing to take advantage of our educational system. At the end of the day, we all make our best decisions when we are operating with stable footing. So my wife, my kids, one of the things I preach all the time is you have to keep yourself stable. Otherwise, you're going to start making some bad decisions. And that's when you start that downward spiral. So at the end of the day, when people ask, what are your goals? What's first in life? It's like, I need to make sure my family has stable footing. And that's what we should be doing for our students. They need to have stable footing. They need to feel safe. And from there, things should blossom. And I think we can teach a lot to our students and our kids and our teachers and everyone involved with our educational system without having to bring politics and sex and gender identity rhetoric in it. I mean, I think we can simply get back to how to be kind, how to be compassionate, how to be, fair. Those are values and virtues that can be taught without having to bring in politics, right? So I know that I'm not going to a Catholic school when I go to a public educational school, but that doesn't mean that I should have something working against me and what I'm trying to teach with my family at home. The classroom should be neutral. I believe that's where we need to get back to. And right now, I know that I had to show some colors to kind of start, to stand up, push back, hold the line, and we need to get back there.
Absolutely. And Leo, you take it away. You can ask the last question. And
yeah, no. First of all, let me just say that's an incredibly tough position to be in. I think that for someone that's trying to take care of the education of the public school system, right? How parents entrust their kids to their teaching and figuring out, just like you said, getting back to that neutral stance. That is not an easy thing to figure out, at least from where I'm sitting and from where you're sitting. I'm sure it's a much more difficult question. So I commend you for trying to take it upon your shoulders to at least try. But as a final question, what's your message to state legislators across this country? Our organization, we talk to and primarily deal with state legislators. So my question to you would be, what kind of message do you have for them as far as what they should take into consideration as they're looking at their own individual states, the families within them, the children under their protection? What would you tell them?
So what I worry about today, and I try to, once again, just try to have some mantras in our family. My concern with social media and media in particular, and where we've headed with all, technology can be great to an extent, but it seems like we all love that like button. I want my post to be liked. I want my comment to be liked. I want to be liked. I want to be loved. And there's nothing wrong with that. The concern that arises, and I'm trying to speak out to the legislators here, is conviction often requires that you take an unpopular stance. Conviction often requires that you're not liked or loved all the time by everyone. I heard a quote one time. I want to say it may have been from Matthew McConaughey, but it was along the lines of, when you're friends with everyone, then you're doing something wrong. And I think folks that are in public office, public servants, to show conviction and to make some of the unpopular choices, but are probably the right choice to either move our society back to where it needs to be or advance our society to where it needs to be. You just have to have those leaders with conviction. And what I'm happy to say is, before I ran for office, I wasn't on social media. I was off the grid. It's been a shock to get into social media, but it's also been a great learning because I'm really beginning to appreciate where our students' minds are, where our teachers, where different generations are with respect to social media. And I think we're at a point where we all just want to be liked and we don't want to do the hard thing sometimes. And I'm just telling you, we have to do the hard thing. You know, that's a mantra in our house. Do the hard thing. It's time to do the hard thing.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, John. You have really inspired me, and I've just enjoyed hearing your story. And I'm grateful for what you're doing for the students in your part of this country. So thank you. Any last words, anyone?
Yeah, exactly the same message. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate your insight. And like I said, an attempt to face off a very difficult topic in a very difficult time. So we appreciate you coming on with us today.
And good luck.
I appreciate the time.
Yeah, good luck in your new role. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time on another ALEC TV live stream.